Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm here with another real supernatural experience that's gonna give you chills. Today's story isn't just entertainment. It's a serious warning, especially for all you teenagers out there who think you're invincible and love chasing thrills. You know how it is when you're young, your blood's pumping, you're looking for that next adrenaline rush, and you'll try anything that seems exciting or forbidden. But sometimes that search for adventure leads you straight into paranormal territory. And trust me, that's when things can go very, very wrong. This story comes from a guy named Blake, and it happened when he was in 9th grade at a prestigious boarding school in Vermont. Blake wants every teenager watching this to understand one thing. Don't mess with forces you don't understand. Just listen to this story, take notes, and leave this stuff alone. Blake and his 3 best friends, Trevor, Caleb, and Mason, had been roommates at Mountain View Academy since 3rd grade. Blake was from Oregon, Trevor from Texas, Caleb from Colorado, and Mason from upstate New York. These 4 were inseparable. They ate together, got in trouble together, and basically lived like brothers. Everything was perfect until they hit 9th grade in 2010, right before their final exams. Trevor had just come back from winter break, and he was practically buzzing with excitement about something his older cousin had taught him. That night, when all 4 friends were hanging out in their dorm, Trevor dropped the bomb. "Guys," he said, grinning like he'd discovered fire, "I learned how to make a Ouija board. We're gonna try it tomorrow night." Now, they'd all heard of Ouija boards before. Hell, most of us have wondered at some point whether that stuff actually works, right? These kids were no different. They knew it wasn't exactly a game for children, that you could potentially contact spirits, and if something evil came through, you were screwed. But Trevor was convincing. He explained exactly how it worked. The board with letters, the yes and no sections, and that heart-shaped wooden planchette with glass in the middle that moves around the board when spirits communicate. The other 3 were terrified, but also incredibly curious. I mean, come on, we've all seen those horror movies, heard those stories, and wondered, is this stuff actually real? They planned to meet in Blake's room at 11:30 p.m. to start their experiment right at midnight. But here's the thing, Blake's room was perfect for this because right next door was an empty room that had been vacant since they'd started at the school. The story went that back in 1992 and 2001, 2 students had died in that room, 1 suicide, 1 unexplained death. But none of the current students, including Blake, had ever experienced anything paranormal there. In fact, it was their little hangout spot where they'd sneak snacks and sodas. The rooms shared a bathroom with doors on both sides, so they could easily slip from Blake's room into the empty one without anyone knowing. At exactly midnight, they locked Blake's door and crept through the bathroom into the empty room. Trevor pulled out his homemade Ouija board, lit 4 candles at the corners, and the 4 friends sat around it in a circle. Trevor explained the rules. Everyone puts 1 finger on the planchette. We ask specific questions only. First, we need to find out if there's actually a spirit here. We keep asking, if there's a spirit here or passing through, please move this planchette to yes until something happens. And remember, none of us can force it to move. It has to move on its own. At 12:01 a.m., they closed their eyes, placed their fingers on the planchette, and started repeating that question over and over. Their hearts were pounding so hard they could hear it. 20 minutes passed. Nothing. 1 hour passed. Still nothing. When everything went wrong, after an hour of trying, Mason finally said, "Okay guys, let's call it. This is stupid. Nothing's happening." They opened their eyes and started laughing at themselves for being so gullible. They got up, turned on the room lights, sat on the bed, and turned on the ceiling fan. The wind immediately blew out all the candles. They started talking about the whole experience, what they'd been thinking, how scared they'd been, how ridiculous they felt. Before they knew it, it was 3 a.m. "All right, guys, let's get some sleep," Trevor said, standing up. "I'm just gonna throw this stupid board away." And that was their biggest mistake. See, Trevor was the only one who knew you had to properly close the session. You can't just walk away from a Ouija board, you have to formally end the connection. As Trevor reached down to pick up the board, his hands started shaking violently. The planchette, which they'd left in the center of the board, was now sitting squarely on yes. All 4 friends stared in horror. They knew for certain that when they'd stopped playing, that planchette had been in the middle. None of them had touched it. The fan was blowing in a different direction, and it wasn't strong enough to move that heavy wooden piece anyway. The room suddenly felt ice cold. They were frozen with fear. Caleb snapped first. He grabbed the cardboard board, ripped it to pieces, threw the planchette and coin out the window, and they all ran back to Blake's room. But they didn't stay there. They were too scared. All four of them crowded into Mason and Caleb's room and just lay there in the dark, wide awake, not talking until dawn. The next morning, they got the news. Trevor had been hospitalized. He'd been screaming in pain all night and couldn't get out of bed. Trevor was in the hospital for days. When the school counselor finally showed Blake, Caleb, and Mason photos of Trevor's condition, they nearly threw up. His entire body was covered in dark bruises, like someone had beaten him severely, but no one had touched him. A few days later, they learned Trevor was partially paralyzed. About a month later, Mason was sitting in the cafeteria during lunch. He hadn't put any food on his plate and was just staring out the window at the football field with this blank, distant look. All the students were saying grace before eating when suddenly, slam! Mason brought both fists down on the table so hard it echoed through the entire cafeteria. His eyes had this rage in them that his friends had never seen before. The house supervisor rushed over and put a hand on Mason's shoulder. Mason immediately collapsed, unconscious. They rushed him to the school infirmary. That night, he developed a high fever. When Blake and Caleb visited him the next day, Mason was sitting up in bed, stiff as a board, staring at the corner of the wall. He wouldn't respond to anything they said, wouldn't even look at them. That same night, around midnight, Blake and Caleb heard screaming and people running around the school. They ran outside and grabbed a security guard. Mason jumped off the infirmary roof, the guard said. Here's the terrifying part. There was no way to access that roof. No stairs, no ladder, no fire escape. Nobody could figure out how Mason had gotten up there in the first place. Mason survived, but both his legs were shattered. His mom told Blake and Caleb that Mason didn't want to talk to them anymore. A few days later, Blake tried calling Caleb. His phone went straight to voicemail. For 3 days straight, Caleb's phone was off. Then Blake got a call from the school. Caleb had withdrawn and would never be coming back. Blake never found out what happened to Caleb. His father had picked him up and that was it. No goodbye, no explanation, nothing. Blake's mental state started deteriorating too. He became angry, paranoid, afraid of everything and everyone. He couldn't eat without vomiting. His parents took him to doctors, but all his tests came back normal. Finally, someone recommended they visit a spiritual healer in New Mexico. The man took one look at Blake and said, "I can tell you exactly what happened without you saying a word." He explained that when they'd touched that coin in the planchette, they'd made contact with an evil entity. It had been feeding off their energy and trying to manipulate them into taking their own lives so it could capture their souls. "I can save this one," the healer said, "but I don't know about the other 3. This thing won't stop until it gets what it wants or until they're dead." After a lengthy cleansing ritual, Blake was freed from the entity's influence. But he never heard from his 3 best friends again. Blake is now an adult, and he's never forgotten what happened that night. He wants every teenager watching this to understand. These aren't games. These aren't harmless experiments. These are real forces that can destroy your life. If someone ever suggests playing with a Ouija board, spirit communication, or any kind of paranormal game, just say no. You might think you're brave enough to handle it, but you have no idea what you're inviting into your life. Trevor, Mason, Caleb, if you're out there and you see this, Blake misses you guys. He hopes you're okay, and he's sorry for what happened that night. Look, I know some of you are going to watch this and think, come on, this can't be real. But guys, I've covered dozens of stories like this. The paranormal doesn't care if you believe in it or not. It doesn't care how smart you think you are or how much control you think you have. Stay safe out there. There are plenty of ways to get your thrills without potentially ruining your life. Trust me on this one. Let me know in the comments what you think about this story. Have any of you ever messed with Ouija boards? Please tell me you stayed safe. Until next time, keep watching and keep those lights on.